Good day, YouTube. I'm Daniel Claremont. I'm the Acadian therapist. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for the interest and feedback. I'm really grateful. And so I'm going to keep going until someone tells me otherwise. So far we have talked about a lot of managing emotional reactions, sort of understanding it biologically, what's going on in your body, and how to help return to sort of that zone that we like to be in. I took a look at the number of views for different videos, and by far, I would say the most views have been for the video on window of tolerance, which makes me very happy because I'm very fond of that model and I talk about it a lot. However, there is something about it that, if you think about it, doesn't necessarily sit that right. So a lot of the interventions that we talk about is kind of like trying to get you back into that zone, back into that window. And that makes a lot of sense, because when we're back in that zone, that's when we can be more productive. That's when we can get things accomplished, relationships improve, we feel better. And often we think that it's easy to think that that's the goal, is just to be able to function, to be able to get through your day-to-day life. And sure enough, so when you ground, when you do breathing, all these different interventions we talked about to get you back in that zone, you can get more things accomplished. And frankly, a lot of kinds of therapy focus a lot on that. So you have a lot of forms of therapy that are very time limited, very, very short term, and is just meant to get you back on track and being very productive. And I think that a lot of that it's influenced by our very productivity focused world. So it's about producing more, it's about accomplishing more. And of course, there's part of that is fed by the feeling of not being enough. So you always need to have more. I'm probably going to talk about that in another video soon. But an important piece, I think, needs to be, so when you bring your emotional reactions down so you can work with them, what do you do next? So some philosophies would just say, well, just keep practicing other things and eventually those other feelings will go away. But sometimes, and I think often, it's valuable to just unpack. So once the emotions get settled down, especially let's say something like PTSD or PTSD presentations where the emotions are so intense that you're just gone. It sweeps you away. You cannot think rationally. In the language of the hand model that we use, you're flipping your top. And so you're having that, you're basically not able to think and you're not able to plan, and the nice mature version of you is gone. So there's another kind of intervention that I'm fond of, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So it is internal family systems theory. Yes, I know, back with the jargon. That's just the label for it. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Actually, for the most part, I'm going to make use of a series of comics by an artist named Mardou, who was kind enough to give me permission to share their artwork. And so we're going to move into that. And so I'm just going to let that tell a story, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. I just want to give a trigger warning for folks. So in this comic, there's a reference to a past abusive situation that this person endured. So it's a childhood abuse situation. So if that is a trigger for you, or you think it might be, maybe go back, check the grounding strategies first, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're able to stay calm, and that when emotions come up, you don't get flooded with it. But that is my little introduction. So I'm just going to switch right into it, and then we're going to talk a little bit more. So there you have it. Again, a very powerful comic, and I'm very grateful to the artist for sharing it. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on their website. I'll link to it below. I'm grateful that they're willing to share their experience because I think it's going to do a lot of good for a lot of people in the world. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes unpacking a little bit what was there. So there was a lot of processing that I was witnessing. Certainly it's not their first day. They've clearly worked at this for a while. So if this was a session with a client, it would be a fairly advanced session, probably not the first couple, unless they've done a lot of work with themselves. So important to manage those expectations. Another thing that stood out for me is there's an element of self-parenting. So it's a bit of an older concept in psychology, the idea of the inner child, sort of the idea that the kid that we once were, we still carry with us. Now with this IFS method, we would view that as parts. And that's perfectly fine language. There's lots of different ways of going about this kind of work. But what really stood out was the self-parenting. So and sometimes with clients I'll talk about, so when there's a judgmental thought, when something comes up, I'll encourage clients to think about kids in their lives. So if you have kids in your life, whether that's younger siblings or whether that's your own children or grandchildren or students, the way that you would talk to a child, can you bring some of that same energy to the way that you talk to yourself? So, and if you don't have a lot of experience, so sometimes people didn't have the best influences growing up. So they don't have a really healthy sense of a good way or a loving way of talking to themselves, I would think ideally. So how would you wish someone had talked to you, and how do you wish someone had helped take care of you? So you can practice some of that self-talk, which again brings that down from that aggressive, shame-filled language. I'm going to probably talk more about shame next time. But essentially, that can be a helpful way to help tone down some of those reactions and really hear what those parts are wanting you to know, those feelings, those memories, however we want to frame it. So those are just a couple of notes there. Another very important point, be really wary of practicing this on yourself. I get it, you're looking at YouTube. It's pretty natural. We want to experiment on ourselves. Usually by the time someone's getting around to looking at one of my videos, there's some stuff that's been bothering them for a really long time, so they're tired of suffering with it, so they're really eager to get started, and it's a lot less intimidating to practice just on yourself than to actually sit across from somebody. So I would still suggest that you find a registered professional or a licensed professional to be able to talk to, just because part of the training is to help ground and is to help recognize for risks and also to stop you from going too far. Or if you get swamped or flooded, you have somebody else across from you that can help function in that parenting kind of role, that can help you work with the intense memories and emotions and keep you safe, instead of just getting flooded and re-traumatized and then feeding that hopelessness, helplessness kind of feeling. So that's my plug for talking with a professional or somebody that is really grounded, that's going to be able to help you work through it. That being said, if you're really determined, if you like this idea, if you want to learn more, if you want to practice on yourself, I'm probably not going to put up a guided meditation myself because I don't want to set people up for those kinds of risks that I just talked about. However, if you're interested in looking up someone that I would recommend would be Richard Schwartz. He's the one that came up with IFS based on his experience. I'll recommend his audiobook. I'll link to it below, but it is available through Audible. You can get it for free if you haven't signed up for Audible before. By the way, I don't get funded by Audible. Essentially, the first book you get is free and you get to keep it. Just make sure that you cancel your subscription before the month is up unless you want to continue receiving credits. So you can get this audiobook. The reason I'm recommending the audiobook is he'll actually guide you on some meditations that, if nothing else, can give you a bit of a taste for how this kind of work of talking to these different parts to help move past some things that are built up, how that might work. So I'll recommend that. You can look that up. And if you have any other questions or any thoughts, you can mention it in the show notes below. Again, thanks to everybody that's following along, getting the word out. Much appreciated. And in the meantime, you be kind to yourselves. Try to be patient with yourselves. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.